In 1951, the Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges published a beautiful essay called The Argentine Writer and Tradition. In this piece, Borges referred to irreverence as a key component of cultural innovation. The essay addresses the misunderstanding by those writers and poets who thought to mark their work with a national imprint by appealing to what Borges called the local color. In other words, the Argentine trend towards the local color consisted back then, when Borges wrote this essay, of a European tendency that nationalists should reject precisely for being foreign. After having put aside the notion of a local color, Borges then goes on to define Argentine tradition as being one on the margins of Western culture. He recalls a famous essay by North American economist Thorstein Veblen on the significant presence of Jewish people in Western culture. In his view, their innovation within Western culture was due to a marginalized condition that enabled Jewish thinkers, artists, and scientists to innovate in a culture where they act within its framework, but without feeling restricted by its boundaries. Borges saw the same phenomena at work in Irish writers who wrote within the English tradition and who had also contributed to the innovation of British culture. Some examples Borges offered were Shaw, Berkeley, and Swift. These writers felt different and as not belonging to the land where they produced their work, and thus were irreverent enough as to innovate within its margins. Borges suggests that Argentines, and more broadly Latin Americans, were in an analogous situation. While they can intellectually process all of the topics stemming from a foreign culture, be it from Europe or North America, they do so as outsiders and with an irreverence that can only result in a fortunate, innovative outcome. These interrelated themes of marginalization, irreverence, and innovation that Borges laid out in his essay resonate deeply with my own experience as a scholar and a writer of fiction, because I come from the peripheral country of Argentina in the peripheral continent of Latin America. While many people perhaps would find this condition uneasy and even distressful, it gave me the great opportunity to look at the world from a different perspective. I found myself, furthermore, thriving from the margins, since this geopolitical worldview allowed me to reflect on topics that otherwise I would have taken for granted. As a scholar, I have developed three streams of interest that are profoundly marked by this standpoint and which have converged in several ways. Since receiving my doctorate in 2007, I became more and more engaged in examining the representations of the city in Latin American literature and culture. This interest expanded later to the role that utopian spaces and utopianism play in the imagining of an alternative space, and thus a different social interaction based in the urban setting. My most recent work again takes up the topic of the city, although I examine it here from a scope that focuses on the function of nature. My recent book on environmental narratives from Latin America analyzes the city's specificity from an interdisciplinary approach towards the exploitation of both natural and human resources. In addition to seeking out new attempts to formulate and analyze how Latin American representations are imbued with a discourse of waste and disposal in relationship to both the conservation and destruction of nature, I aim to show that this particular narrative is anchored specifically in the space of the city. My research and my teaching have explored not only those aspects that make the city in Latin America distinct in comparison to other less marginalized urban settings, but my work also continually grapples with what kind of a city we want, and therefore, what kind of social ties, relationship to nature, lifestyles, technologies, and aesthetic values we desire. Borges' emphasis on irreverence as cultural innovation has also an impact in my fiction writing. To write from the margins and with irreverence helped me to envision new ways of pushing the boundaries of imagination. My first novel, Ischia, for example, was written entirely in the conditional tense. Thinking, writing, creating from the margins comprises a privileged position. It is a key component for those initiatives that dare to inquire in a more drastic manner. It is the crucial condition for the architecting of an unthought-of universe, one that is waiting to be discovered. Thank you.